Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we'll look at my other leg workout, 9 days out from the Atlantic Coast Show. One thing that I think has helped me retain size or maintain size in the legs is doing very little cardio or no cardio, as I did in this prep, but then also maintaining gym performance. If you notice, we've got a hip hinge movement in, so that differs from the Tuesday workout. And also you'll see no calf work. The calf work was pulled due to the Achilles issue. So I'm just trying to not go backwards on that thing is pretty much the goal. Also, you can see that gym performance is increasing on this workout to some degree, and it's really hard anytime you have progress. It's hard to not push things. So that's really the psychological issue that I was working with here, is that even say this RDL that we've got in here, I really kind of capped it at 350 pounds. I just felt like the risk of injury was not worth whatever extra reps or 5 pounds here or there might have made. I start with a hip flexion movement. I don't have an extremely scientific reason for this. Calf work is still in my training partner's workout, so he does this while I do the hip flexion. I had some hip discomfort for a while, and I started doing this, and now I don't have the hip discomfort. So we do a lot of hip extension movement, but we don't really try to strengthen the hip flexors very well. So that's really my only justification as to why this might have solved my issue. I did 3 sets here of 10 to 15 rep range. I don't really try to progress this movement. I just, I guess, have a moderate work capacity. Next, we move over to hamstrings with the hammer strength seated leg curl. Similar to Tuesday's leg workout, we are starting with a leg curl movement to get the knees nice and warm to prep us for our squat pattern. I'm not a huge fan of the angle of this hammer strength design. The difference in a seated and lying leg curl is the angle, so the amount of stretch that you can get at the hamstrings, and by opening that angle up at the back pad, it decreases the amount of stretch that we can get on the hamstrings. So to help fix that, as you can see, I've put an ab ball at our upper back so that I can close that angle off a little bit more. Also notice with my execution of this exercise that I'm looping my thumbs in the seat belt in order to brace myself even more. 2 top sets were performed here, and then a back off set. Now we move on to a quad isolation movement, which is the leg extension. With the angle at the hip here, I'm actually trying to create more of what the hammer strength seated leg curl did for us. I push the back pad all the way back so that I can get as much extension at the hip as possible. If I could lay the seat back even more, that's what I would do as far as the back pad. We've placed an old bench pad in the gap that is created by moving the seat all the way back, since my hips don't go all the way back to it. So it adds for a little bit of bracing. Also notice that I've I'm gripping the handles relatively tight, pulling myself down as much as I can, and I'm keeping those knees as straight forward as I can, even though the adductors are trying to push the knees out. As far as why the leg extension is where it is in the workout, is because, again, I'm trying to warm those knees up a little bit better, and I'm also fatiguing the quads so that the load that I'll have to use in my squat pattern is not quite as high, reducing risk of injury. In the off season and even earlier in this prep, the leg extension would go after the squat pattern. 3 sets were performed here with a relatively high rep range. The Icarian hack squat is next. Earlier in the prep, this was before the extensions, but due to risk of injury, I placed it after the extensions. We also are reverse banding it. You can see the little green band up there. Earlier in the prep, that was not reverse banded, but that became reverse banded so that the bottom part of the profile would not be as hard as possible, I guess. The loading would not be as great. And I am pausing in the bottom, again, to reduce the risk of injury. Maybe some of those times I don't pause it, but I'm definitely owning that bottom position. As far as my foot placement goes, I'm trying to get as low on the platform as possible so that I have as much knee travel as possible. So the knees are pushed over the toes as much as I can get them. And as far as my width, I have a relatively narrow stance, but the goal there really is to get as much knee flexion as I can. So I don't believe that getting out any wider than where I have it will create much more knee flexion. However, getting wider than that will work my adductors more, and the adductors are really not main focus here for sure. I would place my feet even lower on the platform if ankle mobility wasn't a limiting factor. That would allow me to push those knees even farther forward. I performed 3 sets here. The goal was 12 reps, and it was not to go to failure, especially this close out. Our third and final quad movement is the split-legged, hip-loaded hack squat. This is a Bodymasters piece. We moved over to this movement from a hill-elevated Smith machine split squat due to a little bit greater level of bracing. The Smith machine variation allows us to push that knee a little bit farther forward, especially with that hill elevation. But due to risk of injury, I've tweaked myself a couple of times with the Smith machine, so we decided not to risk that. Progressing this lift in the last 8 weeks had more to do with me learning the lift and feeling out the weight than it did actually progressing in a way that would be related to hypertrophy. While you may think that this is the first exercise we didn't in some way change the design, you'd be wrong. We put a box under the platform so we could rest our trail leg. It just makes it a little bit more comfortable. 2 sets of this exercise were performed. Our final exercise of the night is the hammer strength Romanian deadlift. Since we modified everything else at this point, I figured we should modify this as well. You can barely tell that we have placed plates under the stoppers to get a little bit closer to our end range. We don't really have the range to rest it all the way onto the ground. We chose this movement due to the lack of internal stabilization required, and because it feels like I can achieve what I'm trying to achieve a little bit better. With a dumbbell or barbell, I am not able to lean as far forward as I could here. When I here, you can see that I've got a forward tilt that would make you fall forward if you had no bracing or it wasn't a machine. Since I'm trying to feel it in my hamstrings as much as possible, the knee is pretty straight and the forward tilt is quite great. If I was trying to feel this in my glutes more, then I would pretty much be doing the opposite of what I'm doing here. I quit progressing this lift mostly for safety purposes. That's also part of why it's buried so deep in the workout that I'll be pretty fatigued by the time I get there, so my output won't be so great. It was an exercise that for the last 3 or 4 weeks of my mesocycle, I just tried to match the reps. 3 sets were performed here. That is a wrap on my Friday leg workout. Hopefully you found something informative or entertaining. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. And our next video will be another workout video, and it will be my pull day.